Today we're going to talk about Trump's refusal to commit to a peaceful transfer of power if he loses, and how the story he used to justify that decision crumbled immediately, and my interview with Congressman Jamie Raskin, who, as a constitutional law professor, has a ton of insight into the legality of Trump's promises to litigate the results of the election in front of the Supreme Court. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're listening to No Lie. So one housekeeping point before we begin, and that's that I'll be live streaming the debate on my YouTube channel and doing some real-time analysis. So if you plan on watching the debate, check it out on my channel, Brian Tyler Cohen, on YouTube. The first one's Tuesday, September 29th, but I'll be doing live streams for all of them. Okay, so where else would we start this week other than with the fact that Trump was asked by a reporter, Brian Karem, the senior White House reporter for Playboy, whether he'd respect the peaceful transfer of power in the event that he loses, and this is what he said.
Win, lose, or draw in this election, will you commit here today for a peaceful transfer of power after the election? And there has been rioting in Louisville, there's been rioting in many cities across this country, red and your so-called red and blue states. Will you commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transfer of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster.
I understand that, but people are rioting. Do you commit to making sure that there's a peaceful transfer of power?
We want to get rid of the ballots, and we'll have a very peaceful. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation. The ballots are out of control. You know it, and you know who knows it better than anybody else? The Democrats know it better than anybody else.
He literally says we want to get rid of the ballots and follows up with, there won't be a transfer, there will be a continuation. Meaning if you throw ballots away, he will win. I mean, yeah, if you don't count the votes, then the election won't work. He's right in that respect. What the guy is saying here is that he doesn't think votes should be counted because he pulled out of thin air this idea that mail-in ballots are illegitimate. Now, in reality, let's think about why Trump would want to discredit mail ballots. There are two reasons. First, think about what he has groomed his supporters to do over the last 6 months. Vote in person, right? He spent every day and night telling people to go to the polls, that mail-in ballots are rigged, that China is forging ballots. He installed DeJoy at USPS, who basically broke the Postal Service, again hurting the credibility of mail-in ballots. Everything he's done has had the consequence of discrediting mail-in ballots. And polling shows that too. A survey by the Democracy Fund and UCLA Nationscape Project found that 48% of voters who plan to vote for Joe Biden say they're likely to vote by mail, while 23% of Trump voters plan to vote by mail. So if you're Trump and you know that mail-in voting overwhelmingly favors your opponent, then of course your focus is going to be on discrediting vote by mail. And the second reason he'd want to discredit mail ballots is more insidious still. It's that he wants to cast doubt on the validity of the entire process, right? The point is the chaos. The point is casting doubt on whether it's safe to vote and whether you can vote by mail or drop boxes or in person. And even if you do, whether they'll get lost or stolen or forged and whether litigation is going to render them invalid. The point is the confusion and the uncertainty and the disillusionment with the whole process. So if it feels like you don't know what the hell to do, that's by design. That's the feature of Trump's strategy. So with that said, clearly he's got a vested interest in continuing these attacks on mail-in voting. And he seized on one story in particular to drive this point home, which is that reportedly there had been a handful of ballots that were thrown away.
You have to be very careful with the ballots. The ballots, that's a whole big scam. You know, they found, I understand, 8 ballots in a waste paper basket in some location. They found, it was reported in one of the newspapers that they found a lot of ballots in a river. They throw them out if they have the name Trump on it, I guess, but they had ballots.
No names on them.
Okay, well, they still found them in a river, whether they had a name on it or not. But the other ones had the Trump name on it, and they were thrown into a waste paper basket. We want to make sure the election is honest, and I'm not sure that it can be. I don't know that it can be with this whole situation. Unsolicited ballots. They're unsolicited, millions being sent to everybody, and we'll see.
And before we start, I love how he just adds bullshit to his story as he speaks to pump it up. So he said that ballots were found in a river and that his name was on them, and then he was called out in real time by a reporter who said there was no name on the ballots, and he literally says, okay, well, they still found them in a river. Like, okay, fine, I'm lying about that, but you should still believe me about everything else. So what happened was that an election worker threw out 9 military ballots in Luzerne County in Pennsylvania. It was discovered by the Luzerne County elections director. The election worker, who was on their 3rd day on the job, was dismissed, and an investigation was opened immediately. Okay, fine. But next, the U.S. attorney overseeing the case, David Freed, who's a Republican, came out with a statement saying, quote, "All 9 ballots were cast for presidential candidate Donald Trump." So Trump seized on this and repeated the claim in an interview on Fox News Radio and pointed to this as evidence of widespread fraud with mail-in voting, and so the election results won't be valid, unless, of course, he wins. Now, a statement like this is not only highly unusual, but Freed's statement actually violates DOJ guidelines. The Justice Department's 2017 guidelines for federal prosecution of election offenses says, quote, "Because the federal prosecutor's function in the area of election fraud is not primarily preventative, any criminal investigations by the department must be conducted in a way that minimizes the likelihood that the investigation itself may become a factor in the election." And I'm just going to go out on a limb, but validating the Trump campaign's constant claims that mail-in ballots are ripe for fraud and naming who the ballots were for does exactly that. But hang on, because immediately thereafter, the U.S. attorney went back and amended his statement and said that it wasn't 9 ballots, it was 7 ballots. And then Freed announces that it may have just been administrative error. So David Freed said, quote, "Our investigation has revealed that all or nearly all envelopes received in the elections office were opened as a matter of course. It was explained to investigators the envelopes used for official overseas, military, absentee, and mail-in ballot requests are so similar that the staff believed that adhering to the protocol of preserving envelopes unopened would cause them to miss such ballot requests." Meaning that because the ballots and ballot requests look so similar, they opened them because they didn't want to miss them. So not only did Freed violate DOJ protocol, not only did he allow for his own announcement to become a factor in the very election he's supposed to be protecting, but the information that he prematurely announced wasn't even accurate. And yet still, this Republican U.S. attorney gave the Trump campaign everything it needed. How many people who heard the initial claim that 9 out of 9 ballots for Donald J. Trump ended up in a dumpster, and then how many people stuck around for the revised statement that not all the ballots were for Trump? And in fact, it was likely due to administrative error because of a poorly trained employee. Yeah, something tells me that the Trump campaign probably didn't blast out that follow-up information as gleefully as the first round. But it actually gets better, because then we found out by Politico's chief political correspondent that these ballots weren't in the secrecy envelopes that all Pennsylvania ballots need to be placed inside, meaning that even if they weren't opened and spoiled, they wouldn't have been counted anyway. And the only reason that these secrecy envelopes are even required in the first place is because Trump and the Republicans fought in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court for it. They argued successfully that ballots in Pennsylvania need to be first inserted in a secrecy envelope and then inside of an outer envelope, and that ballots that are simply inserted into the outer envelope, which are called naked ballots, aren't valid. So Trump and Republicans are complaining about something that they themselves fought for in court. And then we find out that it was the Department of Justice that identified the discarded ballots as being for Trump, not local Pennsylvania officials. Politico reported that yes, a temporary employee incorrectly discarded a handful of ballots in mid-September, but county officials were unaware of who the ballots were cast for until the Department of Justice identified the voters as supporters of President Donald Trump. So that we're clear, this is Bill Barr's DOJ that identified the ballots. The same DOJ that just opted to intervene on Trump's behalf for a defamation lawsuit brought forward by a woman Trump is accused of raping, meaning that U.S. taxpayers are now paying to defend Donald Trump in that case. This is the same DOJ that helped block the release of Trump's tax returns. The same DOJ that threw out charges against Michael Flynn after he pleaded guilty. The same DOJ that asked foreign governments to discredit the Mueller report. So I guess what I'm saying is you should totally take Bill Barr's Justice Department at face value. Yeah, not like they've ever aligned themselves with Donald Trump before. And then, because, of course, it never ends, we then find out that it was Bill Barr himself who actually fed this information to Donald Trump before a radio interview with Fox News. So Trump says it on Fox, and then Fox reports on it, and then Trump points to that and says, look, it's right there on Fox, so it must be real. And that is how the conservative media feedback loop works. That is why having outright propaganda networks that don't fact check, but instead just spew White House talking points is dangerous. Consider too, not only was what Barr told Trump factually baseless, but the guy's supposed to be overseeing an independent branch of government. And instead, he's feeding Trump campaign fodder. And not just any campaign fodder, but the very talking points that Trump was looking for to discredit the results of our election. The Attorney General, the highest law enforcement official in the United States of America, is actively working to undermine faith in our elections. And he's doing it with bullshit stories that don't even hold up after a few minutes. But he was just so excited to be able to leverage the DOJ to help Trump that it didn't matter to him that what he was saying was fake, because everything he does is to help Trump. The fact is, we don't know if there was foul play with these 9 ballots or if it was administrative error, but having this insane conversation where we're guessing is exactly why the DOJ doesn't issue statements about ongoing investigations in the first place. But while they get their story straight, here are the facts. There is a 0.00006% rate of fraud with mail-in ballots. You know what you can swing with that rate of fraud? Literally nothing. So look, just remember, Trump's point here isn't the truth. It's sowing doubt and confusion and discouraging you from voting and distrusting the system as a whole. That's the point of this. Do 9 ballots in Pennsylvania mean that the election results can't be trusted? Absolutely not. And this administration knows that, but they're not operating in good faith. So I'll say this, and I know I repeat this a lot, but if you take one thing from listening today, let it be this. Do not give Trump the satisfaction of discouraging you. Don't validate his strategy. He wants you to give up. He wants you to feel helpless. You know why? Because he knows he can't win on the merits. He hasn't expanded his coalition. He can't. He's incapable. He only knows how to be a divisive racist, period. So his only hope then isn't to appeal to new voters. It's to appeal other voters away from Biden and to depress turnout. It's to make you believe that the system is broken, right? It's to make you believe that your vote won't count. But it's not broken, and all you have to do is keep your eye on the ball here. You go and vote. And if you can vote safely, then go in person to the polls, especially if you can go early. If you can't go safely and you've requested a mail ballot, then bring it to a drop box. Bring it to the elections office. Put it in the mailbox immediately. And in most states, you can track your ballot, so take advantage of that. The point is not to focus on the distractions because that's what Trump wants. You can vote, and your vote will be counted. And states will certify the election results. And Trump will stomp his feet the entire time. He'll throw temper tantrums and issue threats and light things on fire, but it's only because you have the power, not him. And that drives him nuts. So don't waste it. Couple quick notes before I go. First, if you're voting by mail in Pennsylvania, you must put your ballot in the secrecy envelope first and then inside the outer envelope. That is the only way your vote will count. Second, if you haven't yet registered, go to votesaveamerica.com/register. And even if you are registered, you can verify your registration at votesaveamerica.com/verify. It takes less than a minute, so please check the website. I'll put the link in the post description. And finally, to repeat what I've been saying for weeks, as you prepare to vote, find someone who didn't vote in 2016. Find one person, and get them all set to vote. It may not feel like a lot, but remember, Trump won Michigan by 10,000 votes in 2016. Everything helps, so please do your part. To listen to my interview with Congressman Jamie Raskin for answers to all of your questions about the legality of Trump's promises to challenge mail-in ballots, check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. All right, thanks everyone. Talk to you next time.